This is Polyamory Weekly, tales from the front of responsible non-monogamy from a pansexual, kink-friendly point of view. A warning for our under-18 listeners. This is an adult-oriented podcast about really lascivious things, like communication and honesty in relationships. If you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, please visit scarletteen.com.
This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 575 for June 16th, 2019. Coming up on today's show, we love Allena Gabosch. That's coming up on today's show. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Minx, and we have a little bit of a throwback for you this week. I'm doing something I rarely do. I'm not sure I've ever done it before. And I'm re-airing an interview I did with a previous show guest, Allena Gabosch. Now, if you have been watching my Facebook or the Facebook of pretty much every other sex-positive educator out there, you know that Allena, who was the founder of the Wet Spot, the Center for Sex Positive Culture, before it was either the Wet Spot or the Center for Sex Positive Culture, has been a crusader for sex positivity for 30 years or more in the Seattle area. And also that we found out about a week ago that her cancer had come back with a vengeance. There were posts by her friends to her Facebook page saying the doctor said she wouldn't make it through the night. Well, I'll just say that I worked from home that day, and it's a good thing because I spent most of my day crying and did not want to picture a world that didn't have Allena Gabosch in it. Now, spoiler, she has pulled through. She has posted video to her Facebook of her walking down the hall of the hospital in Poland, where she's living now. And we were able to put together some funds through a fundraiser and get her granddaughter out there to visit her. But it really stirred up a lot of emotion, shall we say, to nearly lose somebody who has been so important to our community. If you want to take a listen to Dixie Tour's podcast, Bawdy Storyelling, she happened to be staying with me the night that we found all of this out, and she still had to go on stage and host the 5-year reunion of Bawdy Storytelling in Seattle. Don't know how that woman did it because I was a mess. I didn't want to go at all. And then I realized that Allena would want me to go to Bawdy Storytelling and celebrate people telling sexy, sex-positive stories. So I did, and there was a friend who offered to have me sit with her, and I'm very glad she did because I don't think I could have handled this on my own. And we wore our tiaras because Allena always has worn tiaras when she got her chemo treatments, turning chemo day into tiara day. So we all wore them to celebrate her life, which we were hoping was not coming to an end, and thankfully it didn't. But it really made me realize how precious life is and how precious Allena is. So I have decided to re-air the interview that we did with her many years ago, back on episodes 252 and 253. I'm putting the whole thing together in this episode. So if you started listening late, or if maybe you just don't remember that interview from so many years ago, well, now you get to hear about the glory that is Allena Gabosch. So we are here in Pan's Forest. What is this called? Pan's
Garden.
Pan's Garden of Paradise with Allena Gabosch, the fantabulous director of the Center for Sex Positive Culture.
Thank you so much.
And we've been meaning to do this interview I've lived here a year.
I've known you for a year now. Yeah, we met at that wonderful dinner that Anita put on.
Right, when Anita Wagner was in town.
Yeah.
That was actually great because I think I just moved here and it was like you and Teresa Greenan.
You met everybody.
I know, it's like all the cool poly people were in town, and then I didn't see anyone again for like 6 months.
That was when I had the epiphany that the movers and shakers in the poly world are women. I mean, when you think about it, if you say poly, name somebody,
There are no men.
No men come to mind. I know there's
Right.
some really great guys, like Storm and stuff. There's some really great people, but they don't come to mind immediately. Immediately what comes to mind is you, Anita, Deborah, Teresa, myself. But it's true. It's kind of an odd thing. It's all women.
I can't believe you just put me in the same breath with these amazing women. So, thank you.
Well, there you go.
Awesome.
Yeah, I tell people, I say, I know Connie Minks, and they're like, oh, you do. Yeah.
And then you say, nah, she's really not that great.
She's just
she's kind of lame.
she's just a skinny chick that I know.
Actually, it's true. Pepper and I had this conversation. My goodness,
a bunny.
It must have been
Little tiny bunny rabbit.
That was really a bunny rabbit, guys. Don't you have the sense that you're here? Do they hear the birds? I wonder if they can hear the birds.
There's birds, and I just saw a bunny rabbit, like a little white tail. It was so cute.
Pepper and I had this conversation. I think it was about 5 years ago that he was saying, this is, who are the pioneers of poly? It's all women. And we started talking about this, and this has really come out that everyone who is doing something really innovative, with very few exceptions, it does tend to be women, which I think is actually a really good sign and a really good argument against it's just so men can have more sex.
Well, and that's the thing is because guys, when I talk to people outside of the poly world about being poly, and they'll be like, oh, you got a girlfriend? And I'm like, I got several, but they're not going to fuck you. So, and because there's this assumption that it's all about for the guys, hot by babe action, yada, yada, yada. And no, the people that are really changing it and that are moving it forward. And it's that way also in the sex positive movement and the kink. I mean, women really are doing a lot. And it's and I've been doing it for a long time.
So let's talk about that. How long have you considered yourself a sex positive activist? Was it sex positive, poly, kink? What was your gateway?
My gateway was the BDSM community, but even then we didn't call it BDSM. We call it S&M or kink or fetish. And that was in the early 90s. Like 1990. And prior to that, I've been poly since I was 18. I'm 57, so I've been poly, but we didn't call it poly. I was a hippie, so it was like open marriage or free love. But I've opened up relationships. All my relationships have either been open or ended because I can't be monogamous and I don't cheat. So, but truly what brought me into the activist community was when I married my former husband, Steve, the last husband. He was involved in the kink community and involved with the National Leather Association and putting on parties. We were putting on kinky parties at a swing club in Seattle and called Kinky Couples. And that's when I got involved. And that's when I actually started working as a party producer, an event producer, and just kind of fell into being an activist and an educator. It was like 16 years ago, somebody said, a friend of mine, she was going to college, and she's like, would you come and talk about SM in my human sexuality class? Because they've got it all wrong. And I said, sure, they'll have me. And I've been speaking at that college now for 16 years, every quarter. And they actually are one of the few colleges that pay me. It's a little local community college. I get $25 a class. Not a lot, but just a little bit. It's my honorarium. And I've been talking about kink. And now I actually do one on poly, too. I do a poly panel every quarter. We've been doing that for about a year and a half. So, yeah,
nice.
It's very cool. Yeah.
So how did you become the director of the Center for Sex Positive Culture?
Oh, well, let's see if I can make this a short story, long story. Well,
we have time.
We have time. That's true. So what happened I was doing these kinky couples parties, and there was kind of like the only thing happening in the city in Seattle. We had yearly conference called May Day that the National Leather Association put on. We did kinky couples parties 6-7 times a year. And then for a variety of reasons, we lost access to the space that we did the kinky couples parties at. And there was this little void in the community. And this was in the mid-90s. And a friend of mine and I decided that we were going to open up a restaurant called Beyond the Edge Cafe. And it was going to be where people could come and just hang out from our community. And it was right next to Edge of the Circle Books, which was a little pagan bookstore. And it just made total sense. There was actually an opening between the two at the time. And so we started this great little restaurant, and they had a little basement. And in the basement, we would put on educational events. And that was where we started, was doing education. And this was in the late 90s. And then a place downtown called The Catwalk, who had a little dungeon in the back, lost their liquor license because they were having SM in the back room. It's against the law in this state to do SM when there's alcohol. And so my business partner and I were like, let's throw some play parties in our basement. And then we had a 400 square foot basement, so it's a little tiny.
Yeah, that's pretty small.
We moved into the neighbors. The Edge of the Circle Books had about another 600 square foot, and it was connected by little passageways in the basement. So we had 1,000 square foot, and we put on parties every Saturday. I thought I knew every kinky person in Seattle, and I didn't. They just flocked to our parties. And did that for 3 years, and eventually restaurants and kink don't mix. It's like hard work, and restaurants really hard work. You've been in the restaurant business, I bet. Most people have.
I have not, but I've known a lot of people
few.
that were.
Yeah. 75% of the population has done something in the restaurant business. It was horribly hard work. So I sold the restaurant, and a group of people in our community went, "You can't do that." And I'm like, "Yes, I can. It's my business." but they were like, "We need a space." And some of them got together, and they were going to start a small 1,000-foot dungeon for 50 of their friends. And a guy named Russell Brunel, who's just an amazing guy. He started sexuality.org, and he's just incredible. He said, "Let's start a sex-positive community center." And somebody in the meeting, I wasn't at the first meeting, went, "What?" And he said, "A place where all the sex-positive communities can come to." And they're like, "Well, who can we get to help us put that on?" And I was known for putting on some of the best parties in town. And I got a phone call from Jim, who at that time was not one of my partners, is now one of my partners. And he's like, "Would you like to come and help us with this?" And I went, "No." I'm tired of volunteering for the community. I didn't make any money when I had the cafe, and I was kind of whiny. He says, "Well, how about if we pay you?" And I went, "Pay me to have fun, put on parties, things I love?" And I did. And so in 1999, we started raising money for the center. But at that time, we called it the Seattle Sex Positive Community Center. Its nickname was the Wet Spot.
The Wet Spot.
And we started raising money. And in January, we started raising money. And in May, we found our space. And in June, we moved in. And so it's been, this year was our 11th year.
11 years.
Yeah. And I've been running it the whole time. So that's how we started. And there's lots of things that have happened since.
Yeah. And you know, what's really different about the Center for Sex Positive Culture is from any other place I've been is that it's not just a dungeon, and it's not just a GLBTQ center, and it's not just a poly center. It's everything, anything alternative that has anything to do with sex, sexuality, or orientation happens there.
Yep.
And that's really unusual.
It was one of the things that makes us really probably the most unique, is that we've created a space that we know we're not for everybody, but we've created a space where most, as you say, alternative, I like to put quotes around the word alternative because I don't think what I do is alternative, but most of us can actually have a space, and that's really exciting. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And it really is so different from what you see in other cities, and I really like that. So why didn't, I'm just curious myself. I don't know if listeners are, but I'm asking the question, so fuck you. I wonder why why you didn't just make it a dungeon? Like, why wasn't it just kinky? Because I think because this had not been done before, I wonder why you didn't just go down the traditional path of, we want a place to throw kinky parties, we'll throw kinky parties, the end.
That was the intent of the original group when they first got together, was a place for kinky parties. And it was really Russell Brunel. He is a visionary. He's the guy who started sexuality.org, the Human Sexuality Center or whatever at the University of Washington. It was he started it as part of a class thesis or something. But sexuality.org is like Russell's place and Russell's website. And that was all encompassing, you know. And so he was the one that came up with the idea. And one of the things that's always been so about our community is there has been crossover. Like the kinky couples parties, we held them at New Horizon, which is a swing club. So we're doing kinky parties in a swing club already. Steve and I, my former husband and I, are creating sex positive culture. We didn't even know it. We just thought we were throwing really hot parties. But the swingers would come to it. And our parties had the trans community, the men's community, the women's community, the straight community. Our parties were truly pansexual. We even had adult baby places at those parties. You know, like
wow,
we had a nursery. So we'd already kind of started that kind of thing here in Seattle. And so it was kind of natural for it to grow into something more. And of course, the first, say, 2 years, 90% of the events that happened were in the dungeon, were dungeon type events. But we tried right off the bat to have something that was more about sex, and our grind dances were more about the music, even though dungeon. And one of the things that we do that many dungeons around the country don't do, we allowed sex right from the get-go. Sex happened. In fact, we had people quit the first time sex happened publicly in the dungeon. Because the culture is in the BDSM community is that sex doesn't happen in the dungeon, or if it does, it's hidden behind a door or something like that. And I got phone calls
Really?
from, yeah, it's really weird. Around the country, there's the culture around the country is no sex in the dungeon. There are a few exceptions. In fact, there's more now that we exist. But
I thought that had more to do with regulations.
that's what they say. And there are some of it is about zoning and rules, but I did a keynote speech a while back and at an SM conference, and my keynote was called "It's About Sex." And my attitude, you know, and I
it is all about the sex.
It is all about the sex. And I steal this quote from a really good friend of mine that an elder in our community. If it gets your dick wet, dick hard, or your pussy wet, it's about sex.
If it gets your dick wet, then it really is sex.
And it really is sex, yeah. And so what happened is that some parts of the country it is illegal to mix sex and BDSM, but not all the parts of the country. But there became this culture because one place did it this way, and they're like, "Well, give me your rules." They got the rules because they were starting their club, and the rules said no sex in the dungeon. So they started a culture of it. Number one, and number two, again, sex is shameful. But BDSM and sex together, that's even worse. Oh my God. Even those of us who are sex positive and feel like we're shame free, we still buy into the shame notion. So I truly think that some of it is, if I can say it's not about sex, then it's not quite as bad. And we didn't do that. And even the kinky couples parties, we allowed sex there because it was at a swing club, but we required safer sex because this was at in the early 90s when things were really scary. And we had a long conversation about that when we started the center, was whether it was going to be safer sex required. And we decided not to because so many of our members are, fluid bonded and we have monogamous, believe it or not, we have monogamous members.
That's okay.
It's okay.
We have monogamous listeners.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hi, those of few of you out there.
Actually, one thing, what was I just going to say? I had a thought and a leaf just fell on my head. Two leaves just fell on my head.
You lost all your thoughts. Yeah.
I just knocked it right out of my head. I just wanted to point out that at the center, the way things are now anyway, whether or not sex or even kink are allowed is dependent upon the specific event. Each event has its own rules, so there may be certain nights or certain events where sex is not allowed, or where kink is not allowed, or where, it's supposed to be quiet, or where it's meant to be really loud with music. And so, and again, that's different. Usually if there's a sex positive space, it's usually a dungeon, and usually it's the same whenever you go. So if you don't like the music, tough shit. If you don't like people having sex, you go early.
That's it.
And this is the Center for Sex Positive Culture is really unique in that if you go on a different night of the week, you're going to see a different crowd and a different party each time. And the rules will be different. So what was okay last night, if you go in this night, you can get booted out.
That's true. It'd be like, sorry, you cannot be doing that here.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is, as you just mentioned, you can go every night of the week.
Yes.
That's something that nobody else is doing. We're definitely have created a space that we use all the time. And it's a little hard sometimes to do, keep it going. But
I don't know how you guys do it. It's exhausting for me to look at the schedule.
Well, they say that a bumblebee can't fly, but it doesn't know it, so it flies anyway. We didn't know we couldn't do it, so we just did it. And
you are the bee.
We are the bee. We are the bumblebee of sex positivity. So.
I want to talk to you about your poly background. You said you knew you were poly since you were 18.
Yeah.
How did you know? And how did you deal with it?
Well, not very well at first. I mean, my goodness, I didn't have the benefit of the books and the learning and the people out there. I was a hippie. Pre-ethical slut. Pre-everything. Partly it's because I figured out I was bisexual, or as somebody called me, what was it they used the word? It wasn't omnisexual. I'm
trisexual. You'll try anything.
I'll try anything. Yeah.
Pansexual.
Quantum sexual. That's what somebody called me. Quantum sexual. I thought that was pretty funny. But when I figured out that I liked women and I liked men and I didn't want to just be serial and monogamous. I am a hippie, so I came from that kind of free love where everybody kind of, I lived in a commune when I was 18 for a month and a half, so, you have sex with people and it became not a big issue. So I started out and I was a late bloomer. I didn't lose my virginity till I was 18. I was a technical virgin until I was 18.
I was later than you.
Oh my God. It's so cool to hear that.
I was 23.
Ooh, I'm impressed.
But I was in Texas.
Oh, well,
So,
I was in Idaho.
there's a reason.
So, same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I made up for it. Really made up for it. The first
Yeah,
3
you
months,
did.
I was really bad. The first 3 months. But the thing is that I realized I liked women and I realized I liked men. And I could never find one person that really did everything for me. This is even before I found kink. And so I was always kind of bouncing back and forth. I would open up my relationship or I would end a relationship because I couldn't be with the people I wanted to be. And so my first, I was 18 the first time I had 2 guys, and that was really not a poly experience. It was just a really great,
Really hot fucking threesome experience.
yeah, it was really good, and it worked. And I was also 18, come to think of it, when I had my first male-female couple. And that was when I was not sure then afterwards if I was bisexual, because I didn't enjoy it like I thought I was going to. But then I realized I just didn't care for her that much. I liked him. So Connie was, Dick was, he was hot. And, and by the time I was 21, I was in my first poly, what now I look back was a poly V. I had a girlfriend who was young, and she was young. And I had a girlfriend and a husband, and we all lived together, and they had no sexual relationship. She was my girlfriend. She lived with us, and I would kind of bounce back and forth between beds at night, or during the week. And it's funny, I didn't even think about that until just even a few years ago that was actually a V relationship. So, and I was 21 then, and that was when I really started looking at relationships differently. And I sure didn't do it well at first, It's like when Michael, my first husband, and I opened up our relationship, poor guy, he worked with all men and worked swing shift. I was a bartender at this cool bar. Guess who got more opportunity than he? I won. So I had lots of opportunities to have all these experiences and stuff, and poor Michael didn't. So it wasn't good for our relationship. Over the years, I learned all these wonderful techniques and how to make it work, but it took a lot of years. And I found the poly community, and I use community loosely too, because it's kind of a loose word for...
Right.
But
poly's very, it's still very segmented
these
days.
Yeah.
It hasn't really pulled together yet like the gay community.
Exactly. But it's moving. I mean, we are the new gay, as far as,
I thought I was the first one to say that. Damn.
Yeah. But we are. It's like amazing. Because, we've been written about in Newsweek. Oh my, for God's sake.
I know.
I got a quote.
Yeah.
Teresa got several pages. I got a quote.
It's true. I was just going to say, and we give our hat tip out to Teresa, Larry Scott, and Matt, I think, was quoted in that as well.
Yeah. It was it was awesome. It was very cool.
I know, and we had a duck quacking a little bit ago. I'm hoping that made it onto the recording.
There's beaver out here, and not just beaver, but beaver too. So
yeah, I saw it too. So Paradise. Well, you know what? I don't want to get into Paradise yet because that's a whole other thing, and I want to talk about poly.
Okay.
What was the first poly lesson you would say you learned, or the first mistake you made that you wish you could tell everyone not to do?
Well, the first. Don't fall in love with a psycho babe. Okay. That's just a relationship mistake that we all make sooner or later.
Don't put your dick in a crazy.
Don't put your dick in crazy. No. She was crazy, but oh God, she was cute. So.
And the crazy ones are the best at sex, aren't they?
Oh my God.
They really are.
The best. And she was like such a top. This is way before I got into kink. And she was, like I said, quite a bit younger than me. I remember her sitting on my chest and plucking my eyebrows because my eyebrows were bushy. And I'm loving it. She was holding me down. It hurt, and now I look back.
Wow.
I know, it was like weird.
I had not thought plucking eyebrows could be a kinky scene.
I didn't think they could either,
awesome.
But it was kind of hot. And I still don't have, my eyebrows never grew back completely, but that's kind of weird. So,
she plucked them all out?
No, but almost. She overplucked
wow.
them. But it was kind of, okay, this is a weird conversation.
It is.
But she was kind of crazy.
And there's somebody listening going, oh my God, somebody else has an eyebrow plucking fetish. Thank God I'm not the only one.
There's so many things out
there.
there.
We are here for you.
Yes.
We are, Poly Weekly.
I think that the one of the things I learned early on was, and this was actually really before I became poly, but it really worked for me in the poly world, is when I was 18 and still at home, I fell in love with my first love, and he was a young man who was in the Job Corps. And so he lived a town away, and he would come to my hometown every weekend. And I demanded his attention and demanded his time. And I mean, we had a song. It was the first guy that I had a song with, right? It was, I have a brand new pair of roller skates. It was a really bad song.
Oh my God! And it's like this bubblegum 50s.
I know. And
how cute were you?
His name was Jimmy, and he was like, and there's a lot of Jims in my life over the years, but I was so in love with him.
Oh.
And one day he didn't show up.
Ooh.
And one of his friends was there, because the Job Corps boys all got dropped off at the same time for their weekend away. And I'm like, where's Jimmy? And his friend said, he's not coming back. And I said, why? And he looked at me and says, because you smothered him to death. He doesn't want to be with you anymore. Because you smothered him.
He just left and didn't tell you?
He just left. Hey, this was back, back pre-texting. But, and yeah, because he was young and didn't know how to deal with it. And but I had demanded his time. I was so possessive. And I can truly say that I learned immediately how destructive being possessive is. And I swore that I would never, ever treat anybody like that again. And I would never break up with anybody like he broke up with me. I mean, there was two sides to that. But it really served me well when I started having multiple partners, and that tendency to want to be, because we're raised in a society that's what, the
it's
one and
romantic
only.
if you,
right.
Yeah.
And the mine thing. I don't have that part of me is really, really subdued. It's still there because I'm a victim of my society, but it's way more subdued than most people, because I learned it really young that when you try to possess something, you kill it. Because I killed our relationship from being possessive, and he was too young to figure out how to handle it right. And that was the second thing I learned, and I learned this in the poly world, is to be honest. We have a tendency to want to only tell people what we think they want to hear.
Yeah.
And in poly world, in any life, it's not good, but when you're a poly, it's even worse, because my number one rule is no surprises. That's the big one, and
right.
Like we all should, I think, have. If you can't have any rules or agreements, no surprises.
No surprises, yeah.
And but honesty comes a long way because of that. Oh, that's cute. Sorry. Cute people are walking by. Yeah,
they are.
Yes.
And ducks and bunnies. And,
yeah.
No, not furries. Actual ducks and actual bunnies.
I haven't seen a furry duck yet, but no.
Feathery duck?
Feathery duck? Yeah.
I guess, yeah. You are putting together a workshop on... Did you guys hear that? That was a duck. That was like duck. 3 feet from us. How great is this?
That was cool.
You're putting together a workshop on being a solo polyamorist.
Yes.
Solo polyamory. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well,
that's where you are right now.
That's where I am.
Your life.
Totally right now. I was in a primary relationship, marriage, with my husband Steve, who, if you'll notice, I always call him my former husband, because he's not an ex. He's still a really big part of my life and somebody I adore. But we were married for 14 years, or just shy of 14 years. And we started off poly from the moment we were together. That's how we met, was through the poly world and stuff. So it was a big part of us. And we had the primary, we had agreements around being primary and about veto power and all that, and hierarchical, secondary, tertiary. So that's kind of really my big poly lessons in the poly world, was all about that. And then all of a sudden, when we split up, I realized that I didn't want a primary. I just really didn't want another primary. I have, depending on the day, 7 to 9 partners. Just depends on who's around, There's 9 people that I consider more than casual in my life, that are really important in my life. Some are traditional sex partners, others are BDSM play partners, but they fit in my life. And one of them, Jim, has been together with me for 11 years. However, I still consider myself single, and I still consider myself, I like the word solo poly, because the reason and I'm defining it this way, single poly means that you're maybe looking for a primary. You're single, but you're looking for somebody. Solo poly, for me, this is like, I'm creating it, so I get to make it up, is being content in not having a primary relationship, having no hierarchical poly, and also I don't live with any, and I don't have any interest in living with any of my partners. I like living. I have a housemate. She's probably the last heterosexual person on the planet, I think.
I'm mostly heterosexual. I'm boobie-sexual. I love boobs.
Well, that's nice. She doesn't even care for boobs. But just screw that, or not, But so I have a housemate, and she's the closest thing I would have to a primary relationship. Our lives are very intertwined, but I don't have any of my partner. I don't want to live with a partner. I don't want hierarchy, and it's, for the most part, it's great. I love it. It has its moments. It can be lonely sometimes. I was just last night, all my people that are here all have primaries. Most of my poly people that I play with, most of them all have primary partners. And so to them, I'm a secondary. If you're going to, put hierarchy on it,
right.
To me, they're just all people in my life. And, they're all here with their primaries, and they're all busy. And I was kind of like, and I was kind of whiny for about 5 minutes, and then I got over it. That's the other thing I've learned is I quit whining really fast. It's like, I can't change it, so I'll just go out and do something else. So, I went and visited with some friends, and then I got on the internet. That's the thing I do when
Okay, Cupid, vet life, baby.
Yeah. Oh my God, I just got hit on by another 18-year-old. It was so fun. It's that cougar thing. I haven't taken any up on it yet, but I think I might on this one because he's been real respectful. He didn't just say, "Hey, you make my dick hard," or "I think you're hot and I like to fuck hot, horny
cougar women."
How this guy, one kid put it, "I like to fuck hot older women." And I'm like, well, that's really nice. Then it turned out he was 16. I didn't meet him. It was on OkCupid. Because he's 19. He wrote me. He goes, what would you do if I told you I wasn't 19? And I'm like, well, how old are you? And he wrote back, to his credit, 16. I went, call me in 2 years? Duh. That was scary. But
it is.
That's why you don't meet
also,
anybody on OkCupid unless you check their ID.
I wonder if maybe I watch too much TV, but I'm wondering if it also could have been a cop too. Like somebody, it could have been someone looking to see if, there is somebody willing to fuck a 16-year-old through OkCupid. And, some journalist doing an expose on the, dark side of dating sites.
I've met some nice people in OkCupid, but I've yet to meet any of the young ones purposely. But this one,
I've had varying luck with it. I will say I haven't had any really great. I've had some OkCupid dates.
I've made good friends.
OkCupid dates.
OkCupid, yeah.
OkCupid dates. And I had some that I'm like, really? Seriously? That's how you're approaching life? Interesting.
Oh, yes.
Moving on. None of this, but I also know so many people, and we've talked about this on the show, that so many people say they met their partners. They met their poly partners. They met their kinky partners through OkCupid. And I had enough people tell me that I decided it was worth putting the time in.
Yeah, I don't even know why I'm on it. I'm busy enough as it is. It's more of, it's almost like an experiment, and you never know.
It is.
And
exactly.
I like to meet interesting people.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily I'm looking for, you don't even really have to, in fact, you find the best people when you're not looking for something in particular. Right.
And the best thing that's come out of OkCupid for me is, I had 2 dates, one in the morning and one at night. And the one at night was the one I thought was going to be the least good, and the guy in the morning turned out to be the worst. He was kind of this redneck long hair. I have a thing for long-haired men. And
me too.
And Jim used to have hair down to his waist. I just want you to know this. And now doesn't, but he was so hot. I mean, he's still hot. Oops. But,
hopefully he doesn't listen.
Yeah.
We love you, Jim.
But yeah, so this one guy, he turned out to be a little bit too rednecky for me. Then I meet this other guy, and we hit it off really good, but we got a little too drunk. And you know how when you get a little too drunk, things don't always work in the male department, and sex didn't quite happen. Well, some sex happened, but the sex he wanted didn't happen. And then the second time we got together, he was so nervous about sex not happening before, it didn't happen again, right? So I was just like, but I liked him as a person. He was just really cool. So I introduced him to my housemate. Now, they just have a fuck buddy relationship, but they have the best relationship. He's turned out to be a good friend of the family now. He's somebody that I just adore. And, I hope he doesn't listen to this because I just talked about his shortcomings, which they're not really short, but
no, it was circumstances.
It was just happened. It was just something that happened.
And you didn't name him.
No.
But now I think everybody knows that if you want to meet the cool people, if you want to get the cool people in your life, you just hang around Allena and
I'll introduce
she'll be like,
you.
wait, I bet you would like so-and-so.
And I have done that with several partners over the years. I like to do that, actually. It's like,
you're a real connector.
I am. The Tipping Point, that book? They talk about the connectors.
Malcolm Gladwell. Yeah.
I'm the connector.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I do in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I like OkCupid. I think it's fun, and I've met some interesting people. some duds, you meet somebody, they sound really good online.
That's true on any dating site, though.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, anyone.
Yeah. At least you probably don't. The thing with OkCupid is you don't get people as freaked out as on other sites by the poly or by the kink or by whatever. You can. It's a little more likely that won't be the issue, and the issue might just be that you don't like each other, or you have conflicting interests, or what have you.
Are you're sitting there with somebody at the coffee shop, and you ask them a question about themselves, and they answer it, and then they sit there and they don't ask you shit. Yeah. They don't say, well, how about you? Or what? They just sit there and look at you. And I'm thinking, what an idiot. So I didn't see him again. Oh. But something interesting, because you brought this to mind, is I have people that get more freaked out that I'm poly than that I'm kinky.
Yes. That is
so
very
weird.
Very common. And my theory on this is that because we see kink is becoming more mainstream on TV and in movies, we see it's incorrectly portrayed, but it is, it's more common. And,
yes.
And we're seeing it a little bit more, and people are a little more free to talk about it. It's not unusual for people who would identify as mainstream / vanilla / not really kinky to be willing to go to a class on bondage or admit that they've tied each other up with scarves or tried different things. That's much more common these days. So it's becoming much more socially acceptable, whereas poly is still very much on the fringe.
It is.
Very, very much on the fringe. And it's true, because I think, being kinky doesn't really upset the social norm, because you can do it in the privacy of your bedroom.
Good point. Being poly does.
Being poly upsets social norms.
Yep.
It is hard for people who've never questioned the monogamous paradigm, and forgive me for using the word paradigm, to wrap their brains around.
So are you loving Sex at Dawn? Oh.
I just got it. I haven't cracked it yet. I would be reading it right now if I weren't here.
I've read half of it. Talk about messing with the monogamous paradigm. It does so well. It's really great.
I'm excited. You'll have to, Christopher Ryan has agreed to an interview, so I need to read it, and you'll have to feed me interview questions.
I will.
For him.
I actually want to get him somehow to the center or to Seattle. I really am
absolutely
loving
okay.
him.
So if you're listening, you would, but Christopher Ryan, and I'll tag you in the post so that it'll come up in your Google alert, and we'll get you to Seattle.
I follow him on Twitter.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I do actually. This is how this happened on Twitter.
Yeah.
And,
No. So I personally get little flack either way, because I'm just really comfortable with it. But I remember a few years ago I was speaking at the college that I speak in, and this before we were doing poly. That was a mosquito.
If you're here smacking sounds, I'm not hitting her. I'm hitting mosquitoes because we're outside. I'm getting bitten.
And I was talking about BDSM, because that's what the class is about. And this is back before we started doing poly panels too. And I always mention that I'm polyamorous and everything, and that freaks the students out a little bit more than the BDSM. And this little girl was sitting in the back of the room, and she had tears in her eyes. She was sobbing. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I feel." And that time, I was in a triad with my husband and another woman and myself, and she lived with us, and at that time it was very good. And she goes, "I feel so sorry for you." And I said, "Why?" And I was really puzzled. And she says, "Because you don't have anybody who loves just you." And I looked at her and I said, "Honey, I have a husband and a wife and boyfriends and girlfriends. I'm so blessed and so loved." And she just sobbed, and I was kind of taken aback, and I realized that somebody in her life had cheated on her, or her father and mother had gotten broken up because of an infidelity. Because a lot of people, when I say I'm poly, they go, "Oh, that just gives you license to cheat." Right. And I said, "No, it has nothing to do with cheating, because it has integrity and honesty involved." It's like poly people cheat, but that's because they break agreements. That's what cheating is, not having multiple relationships. But it's the one I get the most negative reactions when I get them, are because I, am living a life that I think people envy.
Well,
but it does upset the social paradigm.
You do, and you bring up a really good point that people who have been cheated on or had, parents break up in a really ugly or terribly traumatic way at a young age because of cheating, if that's the only view of anything like polyamory that they know, it's really hard to see it as a constructive, beautiful, loving thing. It is. If that's your only access to it, then of course it's going to be difficult to see it as loving and consensual, because their experience with it most likely has not been in a thoughtful, consensual, loving way.
That's right. And and we are enculturated to believe that we are.
Is that a word?
Enculturated.
I love that. I'm going to start using it. Enculturated. Spread it around.
Enculturated. to be, we look for the one. Remember, I talked about this in my workshops. We're looking for the one. It's, you are the one for me. We got our Prince Charming and our Cinderella and all our crap that goes along with all that stuff. And the reality is that, till death do you part, you were, you died at 35 in childbirth, or you were gored by an ox out in the field or something, and you didn't live to be 100. And my grandmother and grandfather were married just shy of 70 years. When Grandpa died at 100, she was 88. She was a younger woman. And 2 years out, did something poop on my head? No, okay. Something just landed on my head.
I'm not into that, but you go right ahead.
I got a brown hanky somewhere, I think. Yeah. And my grandmother, on her 90th birthday, told my brother-in-law that my grandfather was a wonderful provider, but a lousy husband. And I'm thinking, my grandma lived for 70 years almost with a man. And I know what she meant by lousy husband, because they never slept in the same bedroom that I remember. And it's that she was with a man who had no passion. And Grandpa was a cool dude, but he was not a passion. He was kind of a stiff, I'm going to guess that they had sex up until my stepmother was born and then never had sex again. I mean, I just get that from them. And yet, because of her enculturation, she didn't look elsewhere. And I know my grandma, she went without sex all of her life.
Oh, poor woman.
Yes. I mean, think about that. And yet that's what the monogamous paradigm does, if you truly do believe. And that's the other thing. I meet people through the center. I met a guy a few years ago whose wife, he's a monogamous gentleman. His wife was not a member. He did not do anything at the center other than come and just be, because he wanted to be in a sexual area. And she had, and I can't remember the name of it, it's where sex is painful. There's a name for it. It's dyspareunia. Yes. So she had dyspareunia.
Because I'll insert here. I had that, but it turned out that it was actually just that my boyfriend's cock was way too big.
Okay, well, that's another reason. Yeah.
I started dating a smaller guy, not painful.
Oh, that's kind of cute. Thank you. Well, I don't think that was the problem.
Yes.
So anyhow, so they've been married for 20 years, and she looked at him one day and she goes, "I don't think we're going to have sex anymore." And he looks at her and he goes, "Any kind of sex?" And she says, "No, I don't want sex anymore. It's painful. It's not pleasant. I don't want to give you head. I don't want sex anymore." Now, they're monogamous. So he came to me, we talked about this, and he was obviously upset. And I looked at him and I said, that was not consensual. You did not consent to a life without sex. So by virtue of, now we can't expect that our partner is going to automatically have sex with us. However, there is almost an unwritten expectation that when you are in a monogamous married relationship, the sex is going to happen, even if it's just at some point. And for a partner to remove it completely and say, you don't have any choice because we're married and monogamous, to go else, she would not allow him to go elsewhere, nothing. Totally non-consensual. I gave him the book, The Ethical Slut. I have no idea. He shortly after that quit the center, and I'm really afraid for him because, and I'm afraid for them and their relationship, because what she did was not consensual to him, to take away his opportunities. Now, if they would have been polyamorous and she could have made that choice for herself, it wouldn't have been a choice for him. He would have been able to still have, because he said, I love her in all other ways. This is somebody that was a companion and stuff, and still would have been able to have sex someplace else. And the kind of intimacy, because sex isn't just about the fucking, it's about the intimacy.
Right.
And when you remove that, you remove something really core to what human beings need.
Right.
And so it was a really sad moment when I realized, but I see this happen, and it's not just, I know a couple where he took it away. It's not just that the women, people for many reasons quit having sex.
Right.
And when they're monogamous, it becomes a tragedy.
So we have been talking for almost an hour, and I I know, it's crazy. And now I don't know if you guys can hear in the background, probably not. There are people, I'm hearing slaps and screams in the background. Let's talk really briefly about Paradise Unbound and what it is that we have here. This is our 9th year of our yearly campout. It's a fundraiser for the center and an opportunity to bring people from all different parts of the sex positive community and under one roof at the same time. We're on a piece of what I call sacred property in the Redmond Falls City area. This is
12 acres plus there's another like 75 acres surrounding us, that marsh and woods, and it's got a pool and hot tubs and we're in the bower area with beds that are kind of tucked underneath the woods, and a beautiful garden called Pan's Garden, and people come here and camp and play and dine. We have it set up so you can actually not leave the space once you get here, and it's a week long. And next year we're actually moving it to middle of August. It's been over Labor Day week since we started, but the weather, it's a little bit better earlier in August, so we're moving it. But it is,
and then it wouldn't coincide with PAX and DragonCon, which is a tough
Burning
call.
Man. And
that's
Burning
true,
Man,
Burning Man too, right.
So we're hoping that, they will also increase. Our numbers are good. There's going to probably be close to 300 people here today. But it is truly one of the most magical things that I've helped create. We have entertainment every night. Last night we had a talent show, and the night before that we had comedy, and tonight we have drag kings and boylesque, and tomorrow we have a kinky circus, and just so there's food and opportunities to play. And it came out of a conversation that one of our old board presidents and I had about 9 years and 2.5 months ago. And he's like, we should do something at the Longhouse, what's the name of this place? And we're like, what? And he goes, like a camp out. And I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. And we picked Labor Day weekend, and we did it for the first time. It was 4 days, and we didn't have the kitchen. That's all been built since, the outdoor kitchen. And everybody said, you're crazy. You can't do that in 2.5 months. And we did, and it worked, and we had this great event, and we've just kept it going. And it's truly magical. And the space it really is a sacred space. This is a place, the Venusian Church this is their land. And so it's a sacred sexuality church that has created a beautiful place to come and have a retreat. This is like a retreat for us. So
I have a challenge for you.
Yes.
Hearing even just parts of your story, and thank you for sharing all of that with us, by the way. You've been very active in kink and poly, all sorts of sex-positive communities for the last 10 years. And, you yourself have had, some of the common challenges. And you're one of the most amazing event coordinators I've ever seen. And being very active in social media, that's saying something, because those people know how to throw an event like nobody's business. I think you need to write a book.
Oh, I think you're right.
I think you need to write a book specifically on organizing and event coordination within alternative communities.
Oh, that's one I hadn't even thought of.
Because that's really what you've done. I mean, and you could call it whatever. I mean, it could be driven by passion. You could talk about the passion and whatever. But this needs to be done, because so many people want to put together events and they want to be activists and they don't know how.
Yeah.
And we may not. It's very rare, kind of like with Poly. It's very rare that one person has all the characteristics you need to put together a successful event, activist movement, whatever.
Yep.
And you have, I think, the most valuable quality, which is you're a connector. And well, okay, I'll say, and secondary to that, boundless energy.
Yeah, sometimes it's not as boundless as I thought. It's interesting, because I just had a conversation today with the gentleman who runs this space, who's kind of the patriarch and the sacred leader. I don't know what we call him, but we had a conversation today about the need to get out there to the world the whole idea of creating sex positive space, and that kind of an activist need to put it out there. And we were just talking about that, about maybe doing some workshops and stuff. So that's and I've got a couple books in the works, and that's not one of them. So that's another one to kind of go on my list. I want to write a book on how to break up and stay friends, because
that would be a great.
It's called Happy Endings.
It'd be a great book.
I've actually got it outlined, and it's started.
Perfect.
But that's a really good point. I could actually do something like that. So.
Well, I feel like I've taken way too much of your time as we're listening to the screams of very happy people, and the sun is out, which it's not supposed to. It's supposed to be 65 and gray all day today, and I see blue sky and sun.
Yes.
So we should go.
I think this has been great. Thanks. And it's been nice to get away for a few minutes in the bower and not be overrun by people going, Mom, I need you. So. And
very quickly before we go, the Wet Spot. The Center for Sex Positive Culture is at sexpositiveculture.org.
Sexpositiveculture.org.
Where else do we find you and your projects?
ParadiseUnbound.com is the Paradise one. Mm-hmm. And I am LadySun333 on 333.
Lady Sun 333, because I type it in on Twitter.
And I'm Allena Gabosch on Facebook, and Gaboschallena. And you can find me on all those and friend me on Facebook. I'm one of these people like, I want all the friends in the world. I think 5,000 is the most you can have, and I'm going to have it soon.
5,000. And then you can have more if you're actually if you put yourself up as a brand. So as a page, then you can have as many as you
I think I'll become a brand then. Yeah. But follow me on Twitter. And we also have THECSPC, the CSPC. And
now has a Twitter account.
We have a Twitter account. And the FSPC, which is our foundation, which is the Foundation for Sex Positive Culture, which is our educational branch, and does the Seattle Erotic Art Festival.
Awesome.
SeattleErotic.org.
Exactly. There we go.
There you go. Everything. Thank you.
All right. We're going to run off and learn stuff naked.
Yay.
Thanks, Allena.
You're welcome, Minx.
Again, so thankful that Allena is still with us, still kicking around, and still being a sex positive badass. And just because we're going kind of silly this week and throwing things around a little bit, I put the poly in the news at the end of today's episode because I really wanted to talk about and with Allena first. We got two interesting articles this fortnight about polyparenting. One was from NBC News with the headline, Modern Family, More Courts Are Allowing 3 Parents of 1 Child. There is apparently a law in California from 2013 declaring that a child can legally have more than 2 parents. And there's a similar law in Maine. There are courts in 10 other states that have designated third parents to be available in recent years. And here's what I thought was interesting about this article. So here's what I thought was really interesting. There's the part of the article where they talk to the experts and what this means for society. The first one, awesomely positive. Anita Jones-Thomas, a University of Indianapolis professor who heads the American Psychological Association's Child and Family section, sees potential pluses. Quote, that extra sense of social support has really been found to be beneficial for children, end of quote, she says. And then right after that, they have to present the different viewpoint. But W. Bradford Wilcox, a University of Virginia sociologist, points to research, not on tri-parenting specifically, showing that children in stable 2-parent families do better on average educationally, emotionally, and otherwise than kids who aren't. So let me get this straight. Dr. W. Bradford Wilcox. So there aren't any studies that you're citing that you can point to that talk about the detrimental effects of 3-parent families, but you're still willing to say that 2-parent families are better. That sounds like a load of crap to me. What about you? The next article was in Today's Parent with the headline, Polyamorous Parenting, the Surprising Benefits of the Ultimate Modern Family. Now, I guess this was a Canadian online publication, and it says a growing number of Canadian parents are polyamorous, opting for consensual non-monogamous relationships. Having multiple partners may seem weird, confusing, or even scandalous to some. But experts, parents, and even kids say it offers some surprising benefits. I really have to chuckle at the word surprising. Really? What could the benefits possibly be of having a third adult around to help parent, considering how many people are struggling to pay bills and struggling to have enough quality time with their kids at home? What could possibly be the benefit of having 3 loving, caring parents at home? I don't know. It would be surprising if we knew what those things were. I guess maybe I'm too knee-deep in it myself, but we don't even have kids, and having 3 adults around the house to help take care of the house and do the gardening and do the groceries and laundry has been hugely beneficial. That's without even any kids. More shit gets done when you have 3 responsible adults around the house. But apparently it's really surprising to people that it could possibly be a good thing to have 3 grown-ass adults in the house. So in this article, they talk about these folks, Leanne, Ryan, Sean, and Sue, they say are among the growing number of Canadian parents who identify as polyamorous or, quote, poly, that is, openly and responsibly non-monogamous and receptive to multiple relationships at a time. According to sexuality educator Jackie Jovanov's 2015 report on poly parenting studies called What About the Children? Children in Polyamorous Families, Stigma, Myths, and Realities, 4 to 5% of Canadians identify as poly, and half of them are parents. Note that an actual piece of research was cited in order to reach this conclusion. Oh, wait, it gets better. The available research suggests that being raised by multiple parents or parents with multiple partners can, in fact, enrich the lives of these children. Quote, they can benefit from having multiple loving parents who can offer not only more quality time, but a greater range of interests and energy levels to match the child's own unique and growing personality, says a 2013 study, Children of Polyamorous Families, a First Empirical Look. Oh my goodness, you mean you're actually citing a study to back up your conclusion about the effects of polyamorous parenting? Maybe Dr. W. Bradford Wilcox needs to spend a little time reading some of these studies before he says, ooh, multiple parents are bad. It's got to be 2. We have studies on 2. We know that 2 is good. Yeah, guess what? We also have studies on 3 or more, and it shows that 3 or more are good too. And I'd like to welcome Camilla to the Poly Weekly Playmates. Thank you for joining and for subscribing and helping to keep Poly Weekly going. I want to thank all of you for listening. I want to thank Allena Gabosch for pulling through because, my God, woman, I just don't want to live in this world without you. We are a free resource. We've helped hundreds of thousands of people navigate their introduction to and continued success with polyamory. Your comments, feedback, and donations help keep the podcast available and informative to everybody inside and outside the community. If you have feedback, email polyweekly@gmail.com. Call 802-505-POLY. If you want to book us for something, email lustyguy@polyweekly.com, and you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/polyweekly or on Twitter @polyweekly or @cunningminx. Thanks for listening, and remember, it's not all about the sex.